Hi everyone, so let's get started on this painting of this cute little geranium head. Now I've put the photograph to the left of my line drawing, but I'll put it up separately because you can see that there's a lot of glare on there. So I'll post it as a separate PDF or something so that you can print it out yourself and have it to the side rather than looking at your computer screen as you do it. It'll make it a lot easier. Plus I'll do the line drawing as a trace down in case you need that too. So as always, I'm going to start with a really watery mix of Payne's Grey and Cobalt Violet. I'm going to add a little bit more water to that because it needs to be really pale. And we can apply this to the areas where we can see the kind of violet-y hue. Now, I would probably be inclined to put this all over the flower head, apart from maybe one or two little bits here and there. So as always, I'm going to begin by, I'll just show you one petal, taking the paint wet on dry using a number 4 sized spotter right up to the pencil line like so, keeping the outside edges wet because you want that lovely soft blur as usual. So we keep this to the pencil line, keep picking up the pigment, making it sort of movable. You don't want any overlaps or any dry edges. I'm going to move that out of the way. I apologise for the shadows on the paper because it's a rainy day outside and there's nothing I can do about that. But I'm hoping you can see okay, like so. And taking care as you apply the paint near the pencil line here. As I'm approaching the middle, this section here, I'm going to stop applying paint and just use the blurring technique that I've explained in other tutorials. But I'll always explain it as I go along in case you're new to my method of painting. And those of you that aren't, then it's just refreshing your memory and hopefully that'll be okay. So what I'm doing is I'm cleaning the brush and then dabbing it on the kitchen roll till it's just damp. And then I'm wiggling the brush like so to soften any hard edges out and merge that grey purpley tone into the existing white colour that is here. We don't want it in that area there particularly. So that's a nice soft blur. I'm going to do the rest of this flower head on time lapse. Okay, so this first wash is now completely dry, and as you can see, I've taken it everywhere apart from the areas that I've spoken about, particularly so around this bit here because it's paler in colour. So now we need to put in the next colour that we obviously see, which is kind of like a bluey purpley hue. I have on my palette mixed 2 colours, again weak and watery. It's really, really important. I think it probably looks slightly darker in tone here, but it's very, very pale and weak, as you can see. That's really important at this stage. We're just putting in the colour tones so that we can build them up later. I've used 2 tones, 2 colours. I've used Bright Violet, which is made by Holbein, mixed in with a little bit of any blue that I have in my palette. I used Winsor Blue, I think it is, or Winsor Newton Blue, whatever that is. It doesn't matter if you don't have the exact 2 colours, but you're looking to achieve this tone. Holbein colours are usually very, very good pigments, and I have quite a few of them, but that will do. So let's have a look at each petal in turn. I'm going to move the colour out of the way. So first of all, this one here, you'll see it's got a really dark pink tone on the top. We'll ignore that for the time being and just apply this colour where we can see the obvious purpley blue hue. And also remembering to blend it out into the existing colour here. We want to keep the light areas light. We need to retain that. It's really, really important. So as I'm approaching where the pink colour is, I'm going to clean my brush and dab it down again and blend it into the existing tone so that when we come to apply the pink, we have a soft edge there rather than an overlap. And again, be careful as you approach this area here. Cleaning my brush, dabbing it on the kitchen towel and then blending it into itself. If we need to darken it later, that's easily done. We can mix another colour up, but for now we need to retain these areas. I'm going to put a little bit of it here. Although there is a pink tone, there's definitely an underlying purpley blue mix that you'll see from the reference photograph. When you look at your reference photograph, when you're using it, it doesn't matter whether you're looking at a hard copy or whether you've decided to look at it on another device, which is what I would normally do. When I'm working, I tend to just look at the reference photograph on my tablet rather than a printed photograph, so that you can zoom in on each segment. So that's pretty much everywhere I want to be on this section. I'm going to once more do the rest of them at a faster speed. Okay, so now we have 2 petals of the pink tones. We can start to think about building up these beautiful pink colours. I have 2 mixed on my palette, and again, still weak and watery. The first petal is Bright Rose, which is made by Holbein. If you don't have Bright Rose, you could use Opera Rose, and I've mixed in with it a tiny bit of transparent orange. You could use any yellowy colour just to give it a tiny bit more of an orangey pinky tone. I'll add a little bit more so you can see the difference. And this one here is Bright Rose on its own. It has a more bluey hue to it. So once again, I'm going to start where the obvious colour is, which is this gorgeous orangey pinky tone. It's very, very subtle. It's not that obvious how these colours change, but if you look at it carefully, you'll see that there's a definite switch between a warm and a cool tone pink, and it's important that we keep these in. So first of all, I'm going to put the warmer tone, and as always, clean the brush, kitchen roll, and start to blend it in like so. And you can take this colour towards the centre now, just by maybe applying a little bit more water. But it's really important that it's blended in. But be mindful where you're going with the colour, because we don't want it to be down here at the bottom. Like so. And then picking up the cooler tone, you can see as they're next to each other the difference with it. And again, you don't want to take this anywhere near this section here. It's important that you retain the lighter areas. Only put this where you feel you need to. And it won't be dark enough yet. Don't worry about that. We can build on the colours later. This is just putting the colours in place to build on a little bit later on. And they will keep switching between one and the other. Use your eye carefully to retrain it to see the switches in colour. I always sort of joke to my students, look at things through the eyes of an artist, because when you look at things in real life, you don't necessarily see these subtle switches in tone and colour. So now that that's on, I'm going to clean my brush yet again, dabbing it on the kitchen roll, and start to blend into the existing paints, carefully observing where you're blending it to and taking the colours only in that direction. Here we have more of a pinky tone. Again, I'm going to add a little bit of water to the existing mix and start to blend it where it's needed, like so. And you can take your time with it. There's no rush at all. It will, even if the paint dries, you can use a little bit of water to merge it, as we've done in the past. But you just don't want those hard edges. That's really, really important. So once again, cleaning the brush, dabbing it on the kitchen towel, and just gently merging the colours together, like so, blending them into the paper as you go along. I'm going to do the rest of it, as usual, on time lapse. Okay, so as you can see, I've taken the colours where they're needed, so we have the correct tones in the correct place. So the next stage would be to build upon these colours to make them as dark as we possibly can. However, I've noticed that this is looking slightly patchy, and if you have the same problem, which I tend to get this quite a lot, it's my method of application, wet on dry can give you some patchy areas, but that's really, really easily solved. I have here just some plain water, and I'm using my number 4 size spotter or any brush that you've been using, and I am what I call drowning it or swamping it with water, and I'm taking this everywhere, all over the painting, all over the hard lines that you get when watercolor dries. You'll know what I mean. It has this kind of, it almost forms like a tide mark on the outside edge of it, and I don't like that. Many people like to leave it within their paintings, and that's entirely up to you, but I'm flooding it with water, doing an all over water glaze, and that will merge everything together nicely, and you can eradicate some of the untidy edges that look a little bit disjointed. Now, you haven't got to do this because we're clearly going to be painting over it. I just like to do it because sometimes when we come to the part where we're adding darker tones, sometimes you miss a bit and it doesn't look quite right. And this is just really good practice. And it also gives you the confidence to know that you can put your colours together and do a water glaze without them going anywhere. In other words, they're not going to move around. They'll just give it this lovely softness. And when it dries, you'll see exactly what I mean. When you come to build your colours up, it will look absolutely beautiful just by doing this, getting rid of those horrible edges and blurring everything as I'm doing now. And if you find that there are any sections of it that are not quite right, use your brush and just wiggle them around, manipulating the colour exactly where you want it to go. But don't be frightened of it. Because we're doing light layers, we can get away with this. But of course, we will need to let this completely dry before we continue building up these really bold, vibrant shades. So the important thing is, I'm just dabbing a bit of water away there, is to let that dry. It will all merge together and then it will all become clear towards the end. But don't be frightened of this. Give yourself the challenge of doing something that you maybe haven't done before. Throw the water on it, but it has to be dry. Then put the water on it, let that dry, and we can go on to the next step. So now that the water glaze has dried, we can start to build up this colour a little more. Having looked closely at the tone next to the ready pinky orangey tone, I can see that it is a little bit more purple than we have on the palette. Again, because colour is relative, it isn't until we apply one colour that we can truly assess another colour. But let's carry on with putting this darker tone on so that we can adjust everything towards the end by glazing over it with another colour. It really isn't a problem. So I have the same two colours mixed here on my palette. We have bright rose with a little bit of transparent orange here and bright rose on its own here. As I said, if you haven't got that colour, use the pink that you may have within your palette, such as opera rose or something similar. Once again, I'm applying the two colour mix where I can see it's definitely needed. And we may need to lift some of the veining out on this a little bit later, but for now, let's get the colour into place. I'm going to move this slightly out of the way so that I can see exactly where I'm going. And then just blending that in, like so. Once more with the water and a clean brush. We're taking it slightly more into this colour now because we need this tone here to be the same in this position. Like so. And I'm taking the pinky tone, the pink tone, the bright rose on its own, next to this. These differences are very subtle, and if you can't see them because they are so subtle, don't worry. Paint what you see. Okay, it really is that simple. Paint what you see. When you print off, if you decide that you're going to work from a printed version of the flower, as I am, our printers will print things slightly differently anyway. So be guided by what I'm saying, but don't take it as gospel, because there might be slightly different variations in colour and tone to the photograph that you have. And once again, I'm going to blend this in. Always cross-reference when you're painting. Look at your photograph the whole time to see where you're going. It can be very easy to get carried away and take the colours everywhere if you're not carefully looking at your reference photograph. So we're trying to get this now as dark as we can compared to that colour on the photograph, like so. Once again, clean the brush. Make sure it's damp, and you can put a few darker bits here and there. I can see that there's a definite change in colour here. When we have one petal overlapping the other, it's nice just to have a little bit of colour underneath, and as it happens, it's there anyway on the reference photograph. I'm going to blend this in, and then as usual I'm going to do the rest of it in time lapse so that I skip the boring parts and you can see exactly what I'm doing.